My name is Eli, and I've always prided myself on being the responsible one in my family. Not the favorite, not the troublemaker, just the one who shows up, gets things done, and keeps everything running smoothly. In a family where emotions are loud and often over the top, I've quietly been the anchor, always working behind the scenes, making sure things are taken care of. From the outside, my life may seem unremarkable, but it's a life that I've built through hard work and sacrifice. Growing up, my brother Mason was always the star. The charming, reckless one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. I did my best to stay out of the spotlight, to remain the quiet worker, the one who was always steady. While I supported my family financially and emotionally, I never really felt like I belonged at the head of the table. I didn't fit the aesthetic, so I stayed in the background, paying the bills, handling the hard stuff, but never really seen. I was the one who had to do everything for them without ever asking for much in return, but last fall, everything changed. It was supposed to be a night of celebration, a dinner to mark Mason's engagement. My family invited me, asked me to make the reservation, and as usual, I didn't hesitate. But what happened next? The way they treated me, the way I was left to the side, would make me question everything I thought I knew about family, and as that night went on, I realized that maybe the most painful question wasn't about what I had done for them, but rather, what had I been doing to myself all these years? The answer to that question, however, would not come until much later. The night of Mason's engagement dinner arrived, and I showed up on time, like I always do. The restaurant was fancy, too fancy for our usual family gatherings, which, in hindsight, should have tipped me off. It wasn't the kind of place our family could afford regularly. But there I was, walking into a rooftop restaurant downtown, dressed in my dark navy suit, freshly pressed shirt, and new cufflinks that I had been saving for a special occasion. I'd brought a nice bottle of champagne for Mason and Brooke, along with a custom card with their initials, hoping that tonight would finally be the night I felt like a part of the family. I walked in, greeted by the hostess, who pointed toward the private section where my family was gathered. As I took a deep breath and walked in, I saw everyone already enjoying themselves. Drinks in hand, laughing, chatting, the sounds of clinking glasses filling the air. And then there was me, the one who paid for everything but wasn't even given a seat at the table. Mason, of course, was the first to notice me. He looked up from his conversation, smiled his smug grin, and waved me over. I thought he'd at least acknowledge the champagne in my hand or the effort I'd put into making this night happen, but instead, he barely glanced at me. "Oh hey," he said, dismissing me with a flick of his hand. "Glad you made it." Then, without missing a beat, he pointed to a fold-out chair off to the side, next to a trash bin. "Sorry, this table's for family only," he said with mock sympathy, as if I were the one who needed the reminder. My stomach dropped, and I blinked, hoping that maybe, just maybe, he was joking. I turned toward our mom, expecting some kind of reassurance or at least a sign that this was all just a misunderstanding, but she simply gave me that tight-lipped smile, the one she always uses when she doesn't want to get involved. My dad chuckled awkwardly, raised his glass, and said nothing. Brooke didn't even look up. And then, as if on cue, a few other people at the table laughed at me. I stood there, frozen, for a moment too long, the humiliation starting to sink in. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words stuck in my throat. My ears burned, my chest tightened, and for the first time in years, I felt like a 13-year-old boy again, left out of a family photo because I didn't fit the mold. I walked to the chair. I set my bottle of champagne on the floor, sat down, and did nothing. I didn't even take my coat off. I simply sat there, watching the scene unfold around me. The waiter came by soon after, asked if I was with the party, and I nodded silently. He didn't ask anything more, simply handed me a glass of water and moved on. For the next 2 hours, I sat there in silence, alone, while my family celebrated without me. I watched my brother give a speech about how lucky he was to be surrounded by his closest people. I watched my mom wipe away tears as Brooke called her the best future mother-in-law a girl could ask for. I watched as they opened gifts and shared inside jokes, and I was completely invisible to them all. Not a single person asked if I wanted to order food, and even when dessert arrived, a beautiful cake with edible gold flakes, I was left to sit there, a ghost at my own family celebration. And then, when the check came, everything took a turn I wasn't prepared for. The waiter walked over to the table, leather folder in hand, and paused as he scanned the room. His eyes landed on me, and then he looked down at the credit card on file. "Excuse me, sir," he said quietly. "The total for the event is $3,218. Should I run the same card for the final amount?" And just like that, all eyes turned to me. My brother, Mason, raised an eyebrow and, without missing a beat, said, "Oh yeah, Eli's got it." The weight of the moment crashed over me as I realized what was happening. I wasn't just an invisible guest, I was being used to foot the bill for a dinner I wasn't even included in. I smiled, calm and steady, and said, "Not my table." The room went quiet, and for the first time in years, I didn't shrink under the weight of their gazes. I stood up slowly, picked up my coat, and walked toward the elevator. But as I turned, I spoke one last time. "I was told this was for family only." Mason, his smirk gone, now looked like he had been slapped across the face. My mother frowned, confused, and my father sat straighter, unsure of how to respond, and then I walked away. As I made my way toward the elevator, I could feel the tension in the air, thick and suffocating. The waiter, caught in the middle, stood frozen between the tables, holding the leather folder like it was a bomb. It felt like time had slowed down, as if the entire room was waiting for something, anything, to break the silence. But it wasn't going to be me. I had already said everything I needed to say. When I stepped into the elevator, I exhaled deeply, my breath shaky from the adrenaline. The moment I pressed the button for the ground floor, I heard my phone buzz in my pocket. I didn't need to check it. I knew it was coming, the texts, the calls, the pressure to make everything right. I stepped out of the elevator and into the night air, the cold slap of it against my face like a waking call. I kept walking, the sound of my shoes echoing on the empty street, and I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't go back. The walk gave me clarity. I didn't have to go back into that toxic mess, the family dynamics that had always made me feel like I was just a background player. Maybe this was the break I needed, the break I'd never had. And then, as I was walking down the sidewalk, my phone buzzed again. I stopped and pulled it out. It was a text from Mason. "Dude, seriously? You couldn't have just paid the check and talked to me after?" I felt a flicker of anger rise in my chest, but I swallowed it down. It wasn't worth it. I wasn't his fallback anymore. I wasn't the safety net he could always rely on when things went south. I wasn't going to play that role, not anymore. I didn't reply to his text. I didn't need to. I knew what would happen next: more calls, more texts from my parents, pleading for me to come back and fix everything, to pretend like everything was fine again. But I wasn't going to pretend anymore. The next day, as I sat in my apartment, still wearing my suit from the night before, my phone rang again. This time, it was my mom. I stared at the screen for a moment, debating whether to answer or not. I knew what she was going to say. She was going to tell me I was overreacting, that it wasn't that big of a deal. She was going to ask me to come home, to smooth things over, but I wasn't going to. I couldn't. Not anymore. So, I hit the decline button. A few hours later, the family group chat lit up again. It was the same old script: messages from Mom, Mason, and even Dad, asking me to fix things, to apologize, to make everything right. The thing was, I wasn't sorry. I wasn't going to apologize for standing up for myself, for saying no when I had been giving too much for too long. Mom's message came first: "Eli, we need to talk. Call me when you have a minute." Mason's followed shortly after: "You seriously messed things up with Brooke's family. You owe us a fix." And then Dad's: "This is getting out of hand. Just apologize and let's move on." The messages were all the same. They weren't about understanding, about seeing what had happened from my perspective. No, they were just about maintaining the facade. The same one we had been pretending behind for years. A facade that was starting to crumble, and I wasn't going to be the one to hold it up anymore. I ignored the group chat, left them all on read. For the first time in my life, I felt a sense of freedom. It wasn't about what they wanted from me. It was about what I needed for myself. And that, finally, felt good. But just when I thought I was done, just when I thought I could finally breathe, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before picking it up, already bracing myself for more manipulation. When I answered, I didn't recognize the voice. "Hi, Eli," the voice said, softer than I had ever heard it. It was Brooke. "I know we don't really talk, but can I ask you something?" I wasn't sure what to expect, but I wasn't ready for what came next. She continued, her voice almost apologetic: "Did you really pay for everything? The deposit, the flowers, all of it?" I paused. My chest tightened, and I could feel my heart racing. I hadn't expected her to reach out. I hadn't expected anyone to notice or care about what had happened. "Yeah," I said quietly, finally answering her question. "I did." There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could hear her take a breath before she spoke again. "They told my dad you offered to do it," she said slowly. "That it was your idea." My stomach sank. "I didn't offer," I replied, my voice steady. "They asked me. I didn't expect anything in return. But I definitely didn't do it for show." Brooke let out a soft sigh, almost like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. "Well, my dad's furious," she said. "He thought you volunteered as a kind gesture, but now he's saying he wouldn't have agreed to the restaurant if he knew it was being paid for by someone they basically shoved in the corner." I could hear the frustration in her voice. She didn't seem angry, but she was definitely disappointed. disappointed by what had happened, disappointed in Mason, and perhaps, in her own family for allowing it. I'm not calling to get involved. She added quickly, almost apologetically. I just thought you should know. After a pause, I heard her voice drop a little, almost like she was sharing something personal. I ended the engagement last night. I stood there, stunned, as I processed what Brooke had just said. The engagement was over. Mason's perfect little world, his charm and carelessness that he had always leaned on, had finally backfired in a way he hadn't seen coming. I felt a strange mixture of emotions, relief, anger, and something that resembled a distant, quiet satisfaction. It wasn't that I wanted Mason's life to fall apart, but I had watched him, time and time again, manipulate our family and use me as a crutch. To hear that someone, anyone, had finally seen through his act felt like a validation I didn't know I needed. Brooke's voice came through again, hesitant yet firm. Mason didn't tell me everything. He said it was just a misunderstanding, that you overreacted. But once I talked to the waiter myself, everything changed. I saw the breakdown of the invoice. He told me that you insisted on paying, that you didn't want to sit at the main table because you were introverted, that you left early because you had a work emergency. I could hear the disbelief in her voice as she repeated Mason's version of events. But when I spoke to the restaurant, the story fell apart completely. I was quiet for a moment, reflecting on everything. This wasn't just about a dinner, about being treated like an outsider. This was about years of being invisible, of being dismissed, of being the one who quietly covered for everyone else's shortcomings. Brooke sighed, as if she was sorting through the complicated mess of emotions herself. Eli, I'm not calling to make you choose sides or to drag you into more drama. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I see what you've been dealing with. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I didn't know what to say. A part of me was still shocked that someone outside of my family had noticed, had cared enough to understand. I'd spent so long trying to make sense of everything, to find peace with the way I'd been treated, that hearing Brooke acknowledge it felt both humbling and frustrating. She wasn't asking for my forgiveness. She wasn't asking for anything, really. But her words made me feel seen, and that, for the first time in years, felt like a strange kind of relief. Before I could say much, Brooke added something that made my heart race. I ended the engagement last night. The finality in her words hit me hard. The wedding that was supposed to be the pinnacle of Mason's life, the fairy tale he had built around himself, had crumbled before him. It was no longer just a family dinner gone wrong, it was the unraveling of a carefully constructed image. An image built on entitlement and manipulation. I think Mason has a lot of growing up to do, Brooke continued. And I'm not sure he ever will. I didn't respond immediately. I let her words sink in, their weight heavier than I'd expected. For a brief moment, I could almost hear the echoes of the conversations I'd had with myself over the years, about letting go, about standing up for myself, about finally drawing a line. But it took someone like Brooke, an outsider who had been drawn into our web of dysfunction, to see the truth. I appreciate you telling me all of this, Brooke, I said finally. I didn't expect to hear any of this from you, but I'm glad you reached out. She sighed softly, her voice quieter now. I don't want to get involved in family drama, Eli. But I had to be honest with you. What Mason did, what your family did, was wrong. I see that now. The conversation ended shortly after that, but the words lingered in the air, echoing in my mind long after I hung up. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was fighting a battle alone. Brooke hadn't chosen my side out of pity or loyalty to me. She had chosen to see things for what they were. And Mason? He was still stuck in his old ways. Still unaware of just how deep his actions had cut, not just me, but the entire situation that had fallen apart. It wasn't just a dinner, not anymore. It was the unraveling of years of neglect, silence, and manipulation. Over the next few days, things started to spiral in a way I hadn't anticipated. Mason didn't take the fallout well, of course. His pride wouldn't allow him to admit defeat, but it didn't stop the consequences from piling up. Word got out, as it always does, and the ripple effect of what happened at that dinner rippled far beyond our family. It didn't take long for me to hear from Mason again. This time, his text came with a tone I hadn't seen from him before, frantic. Almost desperate. Bro, Brooke's dad just canceled the deposit on the wedding venue. Said we're not aligned in values. Fix this now. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about his entire image, the charade he had been playing. He wasn't asking for my help because he cared about me. He was asking for my help because his world was crumbling, and I was the only one left who had the power to prop him up. But I didn't respond. I didn't need to fix his mess. I wasn't his safety net anymore. That night, I did something I'd been meaning to do for a long time. I took control of my own life, my own finances, and finally put my foot down. I logged into the shared account Mason had used when he was unemployed, the one that had been left open even after he moved back on his feet. I had kept it open, not out of loyalty, but because it was easier to let him continue using it than to confront him. But now, it was time to take action. I moved all the funds into a private savings account I'd opened months earlier, and then I closed the joint line completely. A small act of defiance, perhaps, but one that felt long overdue. The morning after I moved the funds and closed the joint account, Mason called me 4 times in a row. The frantic tone in his voice when I finally picked up told me everything I needed to know. He had no idea what had happened, no clue that I had cut him off. Bro, his voice cracked with panic. What did you do? I kept my tone calm, controlled. As I sat down at my kitchen table, staring out the window. What do you mean? Dude, I was trying to take Brooke out tonight, and my card's bouncing. It says the account doesn't exist. What the hell did you do? His words spilled out fast, one after the other, as if the faster he spoke, the quicker he could fix this disaster. I could hear the anger rising in him, the desperation. But there was something else too, guilt, maybe, or the realization that he had just lost his safety net. For the first time, he wasn't going to be able to rely on me to clean up his mess. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. I closed it, Mason. I closed the account. There was a silence on the other end of the line, a pause that stretched far too long. When he finally spoke again, his voice was strained, almost accusatory. You can't just, I can. I cut him off, and I did. His words tumbled out in rapid succession, panic setting in as he tried to get me to reverse my decision. Bro, come on, man. You can't do this. You don't understand, I'm in the middle of something important. Here. Can't you please, just fix it? Please, Eli, don't do this. I almost laughed at his desperation. The same guy who had humiliated me in front of everyone, who had used me as his backup, his go-to for everything, was now begging me to help him out of his own mess. Why do you need me to fix it? I asked, my voice colder now. You're the one who's always had everything handed to you. You've always had a way out. You've always had me to fall back on. What are you going to do now? There was another long pause. Mason's usual bravado had crumbled, replaced by a raw vulnerability I wasn't used to seeing. Come on, man, don't do this to me. I'm trying to fix things with Brooke. You know how much this means. I sighed, leaning back in my chair. No, Mason. I'm not fixing it this time. You're on your own. He tried a different approach then, his voice changing to something softer, almost pleading. Look, Eli, I know I messed up. I know I've screwed things up with you. I've always messed things up, but I'm trying to make it right with her. Don't you want me to be happy? Don't you want me to have this? I felt a flicker of anger rise again, but this time, it was different. It wasn't just anger at Mason, it was anger at myself for letting this go on for so long. For always being the one to pick up the pieces, to take the fall, to make up for his mistakes. Do you even realize how much you've taken from me, Mason? I asked, my voice tight with emotion. Do you realize how many times I've put myself aside for you? How many times I've been the one holding everything together while you just float along, acting like you're the only one who matters? Mason didn't respond immediately. There was no easy comeback, no charm, no smirk to hide behind. For the first time, he was quiet. I'm not your backup anymore, I said, the words finally spilling out like a release I didn't even know I needed. I'm not your safety net. I'm not here to fix your messes. You're going to have to stand on your own now. And maybe, just maybe, you'll learn how to do it. When I hung up, there was a weight in my chest that I couldn't explain. It wasn't relief, it wasn't even satisfaction. It was something deeper, something that felt like freedom. I didn't know what Mason would do next, or how he would cope with the fallout. But that wasn't my problem anymore. I had finally drawn the line, and for the first time, I felt like I was reclaiming my life. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again, but this time it wasn't Mason. It was an email from Brooke. The subject line read, I think we need to talk. I stared at it for a moment before opening it. I wasn't sure what to expect, but I was already bracing myself for more drama, more fallout. What I didn't expect, though, was what came next. The email was longer than I expected, polite but personal. As I read through it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something huge was coming, something that would change everything. Her words felt like a mix of regret and clarity, both for herself and for what had happened between Mason and me. The first few lines were almost apologetic. She explained that she had no idea what had gone down the night of the engagement dinner, that she hadn't seen the full picture until everything fell apart. I've been so caught up in planning everything, trying to make it perfect for Mason, she wrote. But I didn't stop to think about what was really going on. And after everything with the restaurant, the lies started to unravel, and I finally saw it. I could hear the genuine remorse in her words, but there was also something else, realization. She was finally seeing Mason for who he really was. And for the first time, I wasn't the only one who had been affected by his actions. I wasn't the only one who had been carrying the weight of our family's dysfunction. Her message continued, detailing how she had called the restaurant herself, trying to clear up the confusion Mason had caused. She told me how she had learned the truth, not just about the payment for the dinner but about the manipulation behind the scenes. The truth was clear now, and Brooke wasn't going to sugarcoat it. Then came the bombshell: I ended the engagement last night. I stopped for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. My mind raced. What had happened? What did this mean for Mason? What did it mean for everything that had just unfolded? Brooke went on, explaining how she had confronted Mason about everything, about the dinner, about the way he treated me, and about the lies. At first, Mason downplayed everything, calling it a minor misunderstanding, she wrote. But once I spoke to the restaurant, once I saw the truth for myself, there was no denying it anymore. And that's when I realized, this isn't just about the dinner. It's about everything. The way Mason manipulates situations, the way he lies to people, the way he doesn't take responsibility for his actions. I can't marry someone like that. I sat there in silence, the phone still pressed against my ear. It felt surreal, almost too much to process in one go. I'd been angry, hurt, and frustrated for so long, but hearing Brooke's words, hearing her realize what I had been dealing with for years, it was almost too much. Brooke wasn't just standing up for me. She was standing up for herself. She was choosing to walk away from the toxic patterns that Mason had created, and for the first time in years, I felt like someone in my family had finally seen me, had finally understood. As I read her email, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. Relief because I wasn't the only one now carrying the burden of Mason's actions. Sadness because this was it, the end of the idealized version of Mason I had held on to for so long. I had always believed that, somehow, everything would work out for him. That he would finally figure it out. But here we were. Brooke's email ended with a short note, almost a gentle closing. I'm not writing this to pit myself against Mason or drag you into any more drama. I just wanted you to know I see it now. I see what happened. And I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner. I sat there for a long time after reading it, rereading the words, trying to make sense of everything that had just happened. I wasn't used to being believed, not in my family, not in this way. For so long, I had been the invisible one, the one who quietly did his part, who stood by and watched everything unfold without ever being truly seen. But now, someone outside of my family was saying, I see you. And it made all the difference in the world. But even with this small moment of clarity, I wasn't sure what to do next. I wasn't sure if I was ready to dive back into this family drama, to clean up Mason's mess again, to put myself in a position where I was just a tool to be used for someone else's benefit. I put my phone down and stood up, pacing around the room. Part of me wanted to reach out to Brooke, to thank her for acknowledging everything, to tell her that I appreciated her honesty. But I also knew that doing so would only pull me further into the mess. The reality was this: I wasn't going back. I wasn't going to continue playing this role of the responsible one, the fixer, the one who had to clean up after everyone else. I had done it for too long, and now it was time to focus on me. Mason's world was crumbling around him, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the need to step in and save him. This wasn't my responsibility anymore. A few hours later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Mason. Brooke just called it off. She says you were right. She's pissed at me. What did you do, Eli? I didn't respond immediately. I thought about the years of my life I had spent trying to keep everything together, trying to make sure everyone else was okay while I silently sacrificed my own happiness. This time, I wasn't going to sacrifice myself for him. This time, I wasn't going to be the one to fix it. I didn't respond to Mason's message. I didn't need to. The days following that text from Mason were a strange quiet. No family group chats. No calls from Mom. The silence was deafening. And I couldn't decide if it was a relief or a weight pressing down on me. It wasn't like I had expected fireworks or apologies, but the stillness felt unfamiliar. The kind of quiet that only comes after a storm. It was as though everything had shifted, but no one knew how to process it yet. No one, except maybe me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe. There was no expectation of me to fix things, no subtle manipulations to bend me to their will. I wasn't the reliable backup anymore. I wasn't the person who picked up the pieces when everyone else dropped them. I wasn't just the one who paid the bills or quietly held everything together while pretending everything was fine. I was just me. But even in the calm, there was something gnawing at me, something unfinished. The email from Brooke had left me with more questions than answers. She had apologized, yes, but I still didn't know what it meant for her, for me, for Mason. I wasn't expecting a miracle, but I also wasn't prepared for the sudden emptiness that followed her message. I spent the next few days mostly to myself. I took the trip I had been postponing for months. Spain. The one I had planned with a sense of nervous excitement, but then cancelled when my father needed surgery. The one that had been waiting in the back of my mind, a symbol of something I hadn't done for myself in years. I needed to get away, to clear my head and remind myself of who I was outside of this family mess. The trip was just what I needed. I wandered the streets of Barcelona, soaking in the atmosphere, the energy of a place that felt alive in a way that I hadn't in so long. I visited museums, sat in cafes, and allowed myself to just exist without the constant weight of expectations. I took long walks along the beach, the sound of the waves crashing against the shore acting as a calming backdrop to the noise that had built up in my head over the years. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty for focusing on myself. I didn't feel like I was neglecting anyone or letting someone down. It was as if I had finally given myself permission to be free. When I returned home, the silence remained. I was surprised to find that I didn't miss the chaos. I didn't long for the family dinners, the group chats, or the constant noise that came from trying to fit in. I had started seeing a therapist, something I had never considered before, but felt drawn to after everything with the family. I wasn't broken, but I knew I needed help navigating all the years of silent resentment, of pushing my own feelings aside to keep the peace, and it helped. A lot more than I expected. During one of our sessions, I realized that part of my frustration with the family wasn't just about the dinner or the way I had been treated. It was about the pattern of behavior they had instilled in me, the idea that I had to take the back seat to everyone else's drama. I had spent so many years being the responsible one, the reliable one, the one who took on everyone else's problems and made sure they were solved, that I had forgotten how to put myself first. That was the turning point for me. I didn't have to be the fixer anymore. I didn't have to be the person everyone called when things went wrong. The healing wasn't instantaneous. It wasn't a quick fix. But it was a start. A week later, the family group chat sprang back to life. I was in the middle of reading a book when I saw the notification pop up. My heart skipped a beat. The familiar names on the screen, Mom, Dad, Mason, were there again, but something felt different. There were no jokes, no casual texts about family events or holidays. This time, it was different. I opened the thread cautiously. Mom, Eli, we need to talk. Can you call me when you have a minute? I paused. It wasn't an apology. I could tell that much from the tone. But it was something. A step in a direction I wasn't sure I was ready to walk down. A moment later, another message popped up. Mason, dude, seriously messed up with Brooke's family. You owe us a fix. Can you help out? I didn't know how to respond, or even if I wanted to. I hadn't spoken to Mason in days, and I wasn't sure I even wanted to get back into the middle of everything. The text from Mom felt like it was dragging me back into the past, back into the role I had spent so long trying to escape, but I didn't reply immediately. I took a deep breath, set my phone down, and stood up to stretch. I wasn't ready to go back. I wasn't ready to fix everything. For them. The feeling of being free, of not having to shoulder the responsibility for every little mistake, was too new and too important to give up so easily. I wasn't sure what was coming next. But I knew one thing, whatever it was, I wasn't going to keep standing next to the trash can anymore. A few days later, my phone buzzed again, this time with a text from my Aunt Karen. I hadn't heard from her in over a year, so I wasn't exactly sure what to expect. Karen was always sharp, practical, and had a way of seeing through the nonsense. But she was also the type of person who, if she didn't approve of you, let you know without hesitation. Her message felt like a complete curveball. Aunt Karen. Eli, I heard about the dinner. We need to talk. Call me. It didn't take long for me to respond, mostly out of curiosity. I didn't know what to expect, but I also couldn't help feeling a little bit of hope. Maybe she'd finally be the one to understand. The one who saw past the surface and recognized just how much I'd been carrying for years. I called her. The phone rang for a few seconds before she picked up. Eli, she said, her voice matter of fact, I don't have time for pleasantries, so let's just get to the point. You did the right thing at that dinner. Someone needed to shake the tree, and I'm glad it was you. I was taken aback. I hadn't expected that at all. It wasn't like Karen to offer praise without a bit of a sting, and it was hard to tell if this was just her way of showing approval or something deeper. You're not mad at me? I asked, trying to hide the surprise in my voice. She let out a dry laugh. Mad? Hell no. I've been watching you get treated like an afterthought for years. Like you're just some kind of safety net. They lean on you whenever it's convenient. For them, and they never stop to ask how you're doing or if you're okay. And Mason? He's always gotten away with it, hasn't he? I was quiet for a moment, processing her words. She was right, of course. That's exactly how it had been. But hearing it from her, hearing someone outside of my immediate family acknowledge it, felt like a weight being lifted from my chest. Why now, though? I asked, genuinely curious. Why speak up now? Karen's voice softened just a little. Because it's time. Your mom's been calling me for weeks trying to get me to talk some sense into you, but I can't make you forgive Mason. That's not my job. What I can do is tell you that they've been leaning on you for far too long. And it's not fair." I leaned against the kitchen counter, taking in her words. I hadn't expected to get validation from Karen, of all people, but it felt good. It felt like the first time someone in my family was acknowledging what I had been going through for years. "Look," she continued, "you've been there for them in ways they'll never understand. But now, they've hit a wall. Mason's moved back in with Brooke's parents, and the wedding's off. They're scrambling, but it's not your job to fix it for them. It's time they learned to function without you as their crutch." I nodded. Even though she couldn't see me. It was exactly what I needed to hear. I didn't owe them anything. "Not anymore, thanks, Karen," I said quietly. I needed to hear that. She sighed, sounding more tired than usual. "Take care of yourself, Eli. I'm here if you need me." After I hung up, I sat down for a while, letting everything settle. I didn't expect it to feel like a huge breakthrough, but it did. It felt like I was finally being seen for the first time in a long time. Not as the dependable one, the fixer, the person who just made everything work, but as myself. As someone who deserved to be treated with respect, not as a tool for someone else's convenience. The next morning, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Mason to Mason. "Brooke's dad just canceled the deposit on the wedding venue. We're not aligned in values. Please, Eli, can you help us fix this?" I stared at the message for a moment, feeling a mixture of anger and disbelief. How could he still not get it? After everything, after all that had happened, he was still asking me for help. Still thinking that I was just here to fix his mess. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I thought back to everything that had led up to this moment, the dinner, the years of being treated like an afterthought, the countless times I had been the one to clean up his messes, to pick up the slack for a family that had never really seen me. This was it. This was the line I had drawn in the sand. I pulled out my phone and typed a simple response. "Me, no. I'm done cleaning up your mess. You're going to have to figure this one out on your own." I hit send before I could second guess myself, before I could convince myself to go back into the role of the responsible one. This time, I wasn't going to give in. This time, I wasn't going to fix things for him. The message sent, and I sat back in my chair, letting out a long, slow breath. For the first time in a long time, I felt at peace. It was quiet for the rest of the day. No more texts from Mason. No more manipulative pleas from Mom. It was as if the calm that had settled in was a permanent fixture now. I didn't know if Mason was going to be okay, or if he would learn to stand on his own 2 feet, but that wasn't my problem anymore. The next few days passed in a quiet, almost surreal way. It felt like the world had slowed down, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the pressure of my family's expectations hanging over me. No one was calling to ask for favors. No one was leaning on me to fix things or make them feel better. It was as though the shift had happened and, for once, I wasn't at the center of the chaos. I still hadn't heard from Mason after sending my message. Part of me thought he might reach out again, maybe apologize or try to smooth things over, but I knew better. That wasn't Mason's style. He had always been good at pretending things weren't a big deal, sweeping them under the rug until they were too big to ignore. As the days turned into weeks, I found myself adjusting to this new reality. I wasn't carrying the weight of everyone else's problems anymore. I wasn't the person everyone turned to when things fell apart. And it felt liberating. It felt like I was finally living for myself, for the first time in my life. I didn't need validation from my family anymore. I didn't need their approval to know that I was doing the right thing. A couple of weeks later, I received an unexpected message. This time, it was from Brooke. I had figured she was out of the picture for good, especially after everything with Mason, but the text caught me off guard. "Brooke, Eli, I think we need to talk. Can you call me?" I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of what to expect. What did she want now? Did she want to apologize for how things went down at the dinner? Did she want to explain herself? Or was she just trying to smooth things over with me? I thought about it for a moment before deciding to call her. I wasn't sure what this conversation would bring, but I had reached a point where I wasn't afraid of confronting the past. I wasn't afraid of hearing the truth, whatever it was. She picked up on the first ring. "Eli," she said, her voice calm but filled with an underlying tension. "I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did. I never really understood the whole picture until it all came crashing down. I owe you an apology for how everything played out, and for how Mason treated you." I wasn't sure how to respond. I hadn't expected an apology, especially from her. I had spent so much time feeling like the invisible one, like my efforts were unnoticed and unappreciated, but hearing her acknowledge it, it took me off guard. "You don't owe me anything," I said after a beat, my voice quieter than I had intended. "But I do appreciate you saying that." Brooke sighed, a sound filled with exhaustion. I didn't realize how much Mason had been manipulating everyone, including me. I thought I was just being paranoid, but now that I see everything for what it is, it's hard to ignore. I stayed quiet, letting her speak, letting the weight of her words sink in. I ended the engagement, she said again, the words like a finality hanging in the air. I couldn't ignore the signs anymore. I needed to walk away. This time, it hit me harder than before. I had never imagined that Brooke would be the one to stand up for herself, to walk away from Mason, but she had. And it made me realize just how much of my family's toxic dynamic I had been willing to accept without questioning it. Honestly, Eli, I feel like I've been living in a fog for so long. And now that it's over, I can finally see things clearly. I'm not saying everything is perfect, but I've learned a lot from all of this. Her voice was quieter now, as if she was speaking more to herself than to me. I don't know if you'll forgive me, but I wanted to thank you for being the one person in this whole mess who didn't back down. You were right all along, even when I couldn't see it. I should have been more aware of how things were affecting you. I was quiet for a long time. I wasn't sure what I expected from this conversation, but it wasn't this. It wasn't Brooke owning up to the situation and acknowledging everything that had happened. You don't need to apologize, I said softly. You were in a tough spot, too. But I'm glad you see it now. I wish I had seen it sooner, she replied, and there was an undeniable sadness in her voice. But I think I'll be okay now. I didn't know what else to say. I wasn't angry at her anymore. I wasn't angry at anyone. But I also wasn't going back into that world where I was expected to be the one who cleaned up after everyone's mistakes. Take care of yourself, Brooke, I said after a long pause. I hope you find what you're looking for. She paused before responding, her voice quieter than before. You too, Eli. And again, thank you. With that, the call ended. I sat there for a moment, letting the silence fill the room. Brooke had made her choice, and I had made mine. Neither of us had to carry the weight of the past anymore, but for me, the most important thing was that I had finally found a way to walk away from it all, without guilt, without fear, and without the need to fix everything for everyone else. A few days after my conversation with Brooke, the quiet continued. I hadn't heard from Mason since I closed that joint account, and it felt like the calm before another storm. The phone calls, the messages, the apologies, everything had come to a screeching halt. I wasn't sure if that was a good thing or a bad thing. But I knew I wasn't going back to the old patterns. That week, I started putting more effort into my life outside of my family. I went out with friends, tried new things, and got back into hobbies I hadn't touched in years. I wasn't trying to fill a void. I wasn't trying to numb the pain. It was more like I was finally allowing myself the space to live without the weight of my family's expectations. One evening, after a particularly long workday, I was sitting on my couch scrolling through my phone when I noticed a message pop up. This one was from Mom. It had been a few weeks since I last heard from her. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but when I opened it, I found something that took me completely by surprise. Mom, Eli, I owe you an apology. I've been thinking about everything that's happened, and I want you to know I see it now. I see how we've treated you over the years, and I'm sorry. I wasn't aware of how much we were leaning on you, and I can't undo that. But I want you to know I'm trying to understand. Please call me when you get a chance. I stared at the message for a long time. It was the first time in my life that I had seen my mom take responsibility for her actions. It was almost like a dream, like something that didn't belong in our family dynamic. But there it was. An apology, not disguised as something else, not sugar-coated, just a simple acknowledgement of the way things had been. I wasn't sure what to do with it. It wasn't easy to forgive her after everything, after all the years of being the reliable one, the one who always picked up the slack. But there was a part of me that was still holding on to the hope that things could change, that my family could finally understand what they had put me through. I took a deep breath and dialed her number. When she picked up, her voice was softer than usual, more vulnerable. Eli, she said, almost as if she were unsure of how to continue. I know. This isn't going to fix everything, but I want to tell you how sorry I am. I've been thinking about the dinner, about how we treated you, and I see it now. I didn't realize how much you were doing for us, how much you were carrying. I stayed quiet, letting her words wash over me. It was hard to know what to say. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even hurt. I was just exhausted. Exhausted from being the one who always had to do the right thing, who had to be the dependable one. I don't know what to say, I finally replied. I guess, thank you. It's been a long time coming, but I'm glad you see it. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. But I hope one day we can rebuild what we had. I want to be better. For you. For the family. I was quiet for a moment, weighing her words. I didn't know if I could rebuild anything with them. I didn't know if I wanted to. But there was something in her voice, something that made me believe she was trying, and for the first time in years, it felt like a genuine attempt to change. I don't know if I can forgive everything yet, Mom, I said slowly. But I'm willing to try. I think we both need time. But I'll be open to that. To seeing where this goes. I could almost hear her sigh of relief on the other end of the line. Thank you, Eli. That's all I can ask for. After a long pause, she added, we've all made mistakes, but I think this is the first step. As I hung up the phone, I didn't know exactly what the future held. I didn't know if my family and I would ever truly fix things, or if I would be able to fully forgive them. But for the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone in the effort. To make things right. It was strange, sitting there in the quiet, knowing that the dynamics in my family had shifted. I wasn't sure where this would lead, but it was a start. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was carrying the weight of everything on my own. I had finally learned the value of setting boundaries, of speaking up, of putting myself first. And that was something no one could take away from me. Weeks passed, and things began to settle in ways I hadn't anticipated. There were still moments of awkwardness, some lingering tension between me and my family, but it was different now. I wasn't the one who always had to smooth things over or fix everything. And they weren't the same people they had been before. There was a shift, a subtle one, but it was there. I kept my distance, not out of anger, but out of a newfound sense of peace. My life wasn't tied to their approval anymore. I wasn't waiting for their acknowledgement. I wasn't depending on them for validation. I was finally doing things for myself. And that felt like freedom. One night, I got an unexpected call. It was from Aunt Karen again. She'd always been a no-nonsense person, but she had a way of cutting through all the noise and getting straight to the heart of the matter. Eli, she said when I picked up the phone. I know things have been quiet, but I wanted to check in. You doing okay? I couldn't help but smile at her straightforwardness. Yeah, I'm good. Better than I've been in a long time. I figured as much, she replied, her voice softening a bit. Look, I wanted to tell you something. I think you did the right thing with Mason. And with your mom. It was time for someone to stand up, and it's about time that someone was you. Her words, while simple, hit me in a way I hadn't expected. It was like I finally had the space to hear them, to truly hear that someone in my family understood the choice I had made. Thanks, Karen, I said quietly. I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I'm still not sure where I stand with it all. But I feel lighter, you know? I'm not carrying everyone's problems anymore. You shouldn't have had to carry them in the first place, she said, her voice sharp. You've done enough for them. You've done more than enough. We were both silent for a moment, and I could almost hear her processing the same thoughts I had. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about taking control of my life and not letting anyone, even family, dictate what I should be doing or how I should be feeling. A few days later, I received another unexpected message, this time from Brooke. After everything that had happened, I never expected to hear from her again. But there it was, a message from her, short and to the point. Brooke, hey, Eli. I just wanted to say I'm sorry again for everything. I didn't realize what was going on until it was too late, and I want you to know I respect your decision. I hope we can stay on good terms. Take care of yourself. It was an apology. It wasn't a long, drawn-out explanation. It wasn't filled with excuses. It was just an acknowledgement of what had happened, and for some reason, that was enough. It wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't about fixing anything. It was just about respect. I didn't know how to respond right away. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just done. So, I typed out a simple message back. Me, thank you, Brooke. I appreciate it. Take care. And with that, I felt a sense of closure, not because everything was perfect or because we would become close again, but because I had finally let go of the need for resolution. The need to fix things. I was finally okay with how things were, and that, in itself, was enough. A few weeks later, I found myself packing my bags for a long overdue trip to Spain. It had been on my mind for months, and after everything that had happened, I realized I needed this. I needed to step away. To explore the world, to be alone with my thoughts and my own company. It wasn't about escaping. It was about rediscovering who I was outside of the role my family had cast me in. I didn't tell anyone about the trip, and I didn't feel the need to. For once, it felt like something just for me. No one to explain it to, no one to try and talk me out of it. Just me, a plane ticket, and the promise of something new. As I boarded the plane, I looked out the window, feeling the weight of everything lift off my shoulders. The past wasn't gone, but it didn't define me anymore. I wasn't living in the shadow of my family's expectations or the roles they had forced me into. I was free. And that was enough. I don't know where I'll go from here. I don't know what the future holds, or whether my family and I will ever truly heal. But what I do know is that I've stopped waiting for someone else to fix things for me. I've stopped waiting for validation. I've stopped waiting for apologies. For the first time, I'm living for myself. And that's something no one can take away. This is where the story ends, for now. But it's not the end of my journey. It's just the beginning of the rest of my life.